Welcome back, everybody. I'm back in the assembly room. I'm going to try to finish up the transmission, put in the splined shaft, and put in the sliding shifter rail with the gear shift and get that all accomplished. And so the first task I need to do is assemble the big gear onto the spline shaft, and it goes on pretty snug, so I don't think I can put it in the case and then drive the big gear onto the shaft. So I'm going to take it into the press and press it on in there, and then I'm going to push the shaft into the transmission case and bolt it in. I'll have to work behind that gear to get the bolts in and get the wire ties around the bolts in, but I think that's going to be my best avenue for right now. Taking it into the press, and I got it assembled here in the press, and I got the big gear meshed with the keyway, and I got enough throw in my press that I can press this down, and this is a lot easier way to do it than try to drive it on once the shaft is in the case. The only drawback is I'm going to have to work with the bolts behind the gear and get the wire ties in there and all that. But anyway, since I got that done, and I'll go back to the assembly room and reposition the camera, and we'll assemble that shaft into the transmission case and get the rail all lined up with the shifters and the gear shift lever installed. So we'll see you in a minute. As you can see, I'm back to the transmission case. I get the spline shaft here that I'm going to set in here. Feed it through here and try not to pinch my fingers. So I found out before you can slip that clear in there, you got to have that sliding gear, the one on the left-hand side, clear to the left-hand side of that spline shaft, so it won't go past the big gear. So you got to make sure that's in there. And then the bearing quill here. I think, well, I can slide that from the other way, I think. This rail shaft, so you can slip that in from the other way. It'd be very close to get it in here in this hole in the gear, but not sure it will. But wanted to make sure I had a plan B if it didn't go in there. That's a brass hammer, so I don't hurt the threads on there. That didn't go in there too awful bad. It's just a tight spot back in there to put the bolts in now. From the book, I can't find a gasket that would go back in there, but I don't think there's one supposed to be in there because it's not that oil tight back in there. There's going to be a little oil get through the bearing too. It's going to swap oil back and forth between the first reduction cover and the transmission case. And even from the crankshaft, it's going to leak a little oil back and forth. So as long as the first reduction cover is got a gasket and all sealed up, that'll at least keep it from leaking out. It might leak with each other, but I don't think originally it was supposed to be completely sealed up. I think for the most part, this outside gear and the clutch is oiled with the crankcase oil, and the transmission grease is not really supposed to be in this area. Okay, I got the bolts in. Let's see if the spline shaft's all meshed good. This is low, and this is reverse. So it looks like everything will mesh really nice. Now we'll tighten up those bolts back there. Now to feed the wire around through there. If you wanted to get the holes in the bolts more lined up, you could maybe swap the bolts around until you found a combination that kind of made it easier to get the wire in. But I knew it was going to be difficult getting that wire in there with the gear on there. But I don't think I could have got the gear on without pressing it on. So I'll swap those two bolts and see if that'll improve my orientation for the hole through the head. Yeah, I think that's gonna improve my situation quite a bit. That's perfect now. That was a good swap. Good trade. Okay, we're getting close. Okay, now I still have to tighten up this nut. So I'm going to so I need to turn down that way. Maybe if I can mesh both gears. That worked good. Now it's locked up to where I can tighten up the nut. I got a hole coming right up there, so I think I can make that. Now, take it back out of gear into neutral, and we can slide that right in there. And the first one is the one with the rail straight up and down. That goes clear to the right into the small shifting gear. And then the one with the angled rail. The angled rail goes in to the big shifting gear. Okay. And then put in the dogs. Okay, I got my camera changed now. See, this rail is into the left hand big sliding gear, and that works like that. And then this rail shifts it to reverse and into first gear. And now I got to put in the detents and line up the shaft side to side for the detents to center on the gears, and then I'll set screw it and put in the locking screw on the outside. But here are the detents. I should probably put a little grease on that and those detents, so they'll come in and out of those detents better. And now I think put in the adjusting screw on the outside here. Now we'll get the shift lever in there, and then we can shift them back and forth. Okay, the shift lever. It's not a new shift lever. I couldn't find a new one. But there is Babbitt down in here for this bearing for it to work in. And back here, it's just a virgin bore through the case. And the case is pretty good shape. The Babbitt's pretty decent. And so I'm just going to use what's in there and not have to fool with it. But I have to put the gate on. That's the only time you can get the gate on this. Later on, they drilled the hole a little bigger on the gate so you could get it up over the shift handle, but not on this one. And then I think I will put a little bit of grease on that too. Washer and a spring to go on there. It looks like it was always in the middle hole, so I think I'll just put it back in the middle hole. Hopefully that doesn't cause trouble as it rotates. Okay, maybe I better stick that in there. Make sure that doesn't interfere with something. Have to kind of bend it over. I don't think I have the room in there. Grease on that. That's going to be tricky. There's a spring. That's a new old stock shifting gate, so I didn't want to paint that. Oh yeah, it's right there. And then the taller one goes to the front, and the long one goes to the back. I think the keyway is going to stick out too far. I'll have to stop the video and try to find a shorter keyway. So on the left-hand side of the tractor now, right here where the spline shaft comes out, that's where the PTO assembly will bolt on here onto those splines, and then it'll have a gearbox here with a shaft going back to the back. So that's what that's going to go in there. This is the adjustment sleeve that was in there with a bolt that locks it. And I got to put a cotter pin in here yet and a couple wires, and I'll be done with the transmission for the most part. For the next episode, we'll do the crankshaft, try to get that installed. This little book here, it's the service manual for John Deere D and GP tractors and E engines. This is a reprint. I got this one from the Green magazine, but this is a pretty handy manual to have. It goes through a lot of the assembly of the tractors, and it'll tell you how to do it. There's some good information like here on the timing. That's going to be used here shortly. I'm going to need all that information to get it timed correctly. And then the fan and the governor and all that. But I'm back in here working on the that's actually GP, but I think the D was up here. And then after I get the crankshaft put in, then install the clutch pulley and put the reduction cover on. One order of business I have to do before I throw in the crank is to change out the bearing race at the clutch pulley end and then put the gear on the clutch pulley. So starting out next episode, that's what I'll be doing, and then we'll throw the crank in the crankcase and start bolting up the bearings. So until next time, we'll see ya, and make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. So we'll see you down the road.